Good day. Today is August 21st, 2024. I'm Derek Fildebrandt, publisher of the Western Standard, and you're watching The Pipeline. I'm joined, as always, by Western Standard opinion editor Nigel Hannaford.
Good evening, Derek. So much to say, so little time, eh?
There we go.
There we go.
And Western Standard senior Alberta columnist Cory Morgan.
Always a pleasure.
Always. Well, we pay you to say you enjoy my time.
Yes, well, what does that make me?
No worries. I don't know. We won't go there. We've got a great show today. Jagmeet Singh complains about Jagmeet Singh. Jagmeet Singh is very upset that someone has been propping up Justin Trudeau and keeping him in power, destroying quality of life in Canada. We're going to discuss who that dastardly person keeping in Justin Trudeau in power that Jagmeet Singh is so upset about. Who could it be? Who could it be the one who's keeping this guy in power, who's destroying the country? We're going to talk about it. I promise you, we're going to get to the bottom of it. Professor Gotel at the University of Alberta says that Danielle Smith has been touring, quote, White Alberta. Very interesting. This is a person who... people mortgage their houses to send their kids to go listen to this person. This person is quoted by the Supreme Court and under former Alberta Premier Rachel Notley, even had some government gigs. This is someone who thinks that checking out touring small towns in Alberta is, you may as well just start burning crosses and walking around in pea-stained bed sheets. Harley-Davidson, an iconic, everyone, I don't even know what to don't even have to say anything about Harley-Davidson, an iconic motorcycle brand. That brand was in real trouble as people start to target companies, major corporations that engage in DEI and other kind of woke policies. They got an earful, especially around Sturgis, as motorcycle enthusiasts gathered there. Just as Indian, which I proudly ride, announced that they were never going to go woke. They're definitely not changing their name. They were coming under huge pressure, and they've abandoned it. They're the latest major North American corporation to refocus on business, to focus on, business. And if we have time, we're going to get to it. The CN going off the rails. Major strike, actually. The deadline's tonight. So actually everything we say on that today could be entirely reasonable, or it could be completely useless information by then, but we'll see. But before we get into that, I want to talk to you about something. If the name Ted Byfield brings back fond memories, we've got a party for you. On September 25th, Toasting Ted will honor the great conservative publisher of the Alberta Report magazine. Yes, that's the same same Alberta Report. That is now one of the publications that will be relaunched by the Western Standard coming up in September. Bagpipes, singing, live auction, stakes and speeches by Premier Danielle Smith, Preston Manning, and Stephen Harper. For more information on this excellent event, which will have many of the Western Standard luminaries there, go to toastingted.ca. Again, go to toastingted.ca, get your tickets. This is a very important event. The real who's who of the Alberta conservative movement are all going to be there under one roof, kind of a gathering of the families, if you will. Don't tell Nenchi, this is not a mob event. Some of you, Cory will get the reference on that one.
Oh, yes. The Wenzels will appreciate it.
Indeed. Okay, gentlemen. Let's start with Singh versus Singh. Someone doesn't sing for their supper. That's a headline we got to use. All right. Okay. So, federal NDP leader Jagmeet Singh very upset that someone has been keeping Justin Trudeau in power. Justin Trudeau is a bad prime minister. Things are getting worse. Someone's been keeping him in power. We're going to get to the bottom of it in this discussion right now. So we're gonna pull up his tweet here from yesterday. Justin Trudeau told Canadians things would be better. Instead, they've gotten worse. Families are losing their homes. Landlords are making record profits and rents have doubled. Our movement is going to take power away from greedy CEOs and give it back to the people. Okay, so we'll break this down. Apparently, inflation has nothing to do with monetary policy, government printing money, government spending money doesn't have, which inflates the monetary supply. That's not causing inflation. It's people who own a basement apartment renting it out. They're the problem, gentlemen. But that's not the interesting part. Really interesting part of what he says. Justin Trudeau told Canadians things would be better. Instead, they've gotten worse. Well, what is keeping Justin Trudeau in power? Well, it'd be something they called a supply and confidence and supply agreement, which is formed an effective coalition between the Liberals and NDP. There's one man who right now could snap his fingers and trigger an election, which would almost certainly remove said Justin Trudeau, who's making things worse here, according to Singh, from power. Start with you, Nigel. Do you think it even dawns on Singh that he is a part of the problem here, that he is, after Justin Trudeau, the most important person in the federal government at this point?
Of course it dawns on him, but he's also very aware that there are a number of members of his party that need to go to October of next year in order for their pensions to vest. There are, in fact, a number of it. I think there's as many as 80 out of a parliament of 338 who are in the same situation of having to fill in a full 6 years. But a lot of them obviously are NDP and Liberal. They even delayed the date of the election, which was to be the 21st of October, but which is now the 28th of October. Said it was so that it didn't clash with a religious holiday, but in fact, put those 80 MPs over the line. Those who lose will maintain their pensions. So this is very typical politician talk. He knows darn well that he could bring the prime minister down in a morning by simply saying, we're not doing this anymore. And by the way, restore his reputation as a politician and a statesman in doing so. However, he doesn't and won't. And that, I'm afraid, is the cynical state of Canadian politics today.
On the bottom of Jagmeet Singh's tweet here, bemoaning that someone's keeping Justin Trudeau in power, is a community note. Readers added context they thought people might want to know. Important context. Justin Trudeau is in government because of a confidence and supply agreement with Jagmeet Singh. By entering into this agreement, Mr. Singh is effectively propping up the government he's complaining about above. And then it links to the news release of said agreement at pm.gc.ca. That's Prime Minister, essentially, .gc.ca. Wow. Consistency in politics is not rewarded generally. I value consistency. If a conservative says, I believe in free markets and supply and demand should set prices, I say, well, what about supply management? Let's talk about supply management. And if they don't have a straight answer there, that's hypocrisy. I don't like it. I don't vote for them. I'm not a probably target voter demographic of Jagmeet Singh or Justin Trudeau. But generally, consistency in politics is not valued by most people. Most people say they will, but they don't. They'll vote for self-contradictory things all the time. But normally the politicians have a way of squaring it in their brain because they have to justify it to themselves why what they're doing is consistent in their own worldview. How do you think, I want you to perform a dark thought experiment here. I want you to get inside Jagmeet Singh's brain, and we're going to pretend this is some kind of seance and you're the medium speaking for Jagmeet Singh. How do you think he explains this? If you're speaking for Jagmeet right now, how does he explain any consistency between this is a bad government that should not be in government anymore, and I'm going to keep this government in power?
Are you talking how he tries to explain it to himself?
Yeah, to himself.
Yeah,
like
because to others he doesn't even try. He just blasts
but
it
to
out.
himself.
I think,
how does he channel that?
I think with a lot of these ideologues, they really think they've convinced themselves. There's a bit of narcissism. They're on the right side of history. He's there to make Canada a better place. And it is so important that he maintains that role, that he can sometimes set aside opportunities to do things like to hold the prime minister to account or take the prime minister out of power. And a little bit of hypocrisy is justified in the course of the bigger picture, which is, of course, him being that great conscience in the House of Commons. He's convinced himself of that. I think maybe that's how he sleeps at night. Either that or he knows that he's full of something and he just accepts it. Because, I mean, you know, to get one of those notifications on X where they correct you, I mean, that's called BS. And it's not a person can't just put a community note in. Well, you can. Actually, some people are qualified. I have that. I could put one in. But then it has to be actually given a whole bunch of readings and thumbs up from other people who were qualified to do that before it actually becomes entrenched. That got entrenched. That's pretty rare, actually. Mm-hmm. A lot of people saw right through the BS. I think Canadians see through the BS. You see that in the numbers. The NDP just sits where it does. Either Singh doesn't care, or he has deluded himself just to think that he's just so darn important that it doesn't matter.
I've got a different theory. I don't think that he thinks Trudeau is doing a bad job. I think he's just saying what the polls are showing Canadians think, because that's always smart politics, reflect what the people think. And Canadians pretty overwhelmingly right now are very unhappy with this government and the cost of living and all of these kinds of things. I don't think I try to be charitable and take people at face value. I don't think he thinks that Trudeau's doing a bad job. I think he thinks that from his kind of fairly far left democratic socialist perspective, Trudeau could do a better job. He could be further left still, but this is part of the problem the NDP have faced since Trudeau became the leader of the Liberal Party. Is he has moved so far away from the mythical center of Canadian politics, crowding out the NDP on the left, that they're trying to justify their existence. What is their raison d'etre? And he does think Trudeau's doing well, but this is political cover because Canadians. I think Jagmeet Singh likes Trudeau more than most Canadians do at this point, oddly enough. And he knows he can continue to get things out of Trudeau. But I think this is cover. I don't think I don't take him at face value here when he says he thinks Trudeau's not doing a good job. I think he just thinks Trudeau could be doing more of what we want.
Well, I think you're probably right about that. The thing is, there's an election coming in a little over a year. So unless Mr. Singh wants to leave people with the impression that, look, you vote for me, you're actually voting for the Liberals, might as well just vote for the Liberals and have done with it and leave the NDP with nothing, he has to try and make some difference between himself and Mr. Trudeau. So I would anticipate that you will see more of this, now that the pension issue is safely settled, that you will see more of this as the weeks and months go by, as he tries to redefine a clear distinction between the NDP and the Liberals. I have absolutely no idea how he is going to do that. If you have been working like that for this long, then you're jointly and severally liable to the voters along with Mr. Trudeau, but it would only be natural that he would try.
Cory, you're really not going to like me today because I'm typecasting you as the villain. You're the Singh whisperer here.
Oh. It's a different form of a villain for me, so that's fine.
Yeah, it's this is the role I've assigned you today. What do you think it would take for Singh and the NDP to pull the plug on their coalition confidence and supply agreement with the Liberals? They've had clear evidence of foreign interference and covering up foreign interference, which is possibly worse than the interference itself. They've had corruption scandal after corruption scandal. We don't even remember SNC-Lavalin anymore. Remember that? Stuff that would bring down any government in Canadian history before this in complete disgrace. But there's got to be a line. I mean, maybe it would require Trudeau to, I was going to say invoke martial law. No, he already did that. What would it take? There's got to be a line somewhere that's however extreme. And I mean, what is that line?
The NDP support level's been static. It's not really dropping much either. It's just sitting there. It's dropping a bit, but that's his core. That's all he's got left is the core. And who's the core? The real hardcore are the unions still. I mean, some of the woke policies are starting to trouble some of the labor unions, but the civil service unions and some of the others, that's still their core. If Trudeau were to have it out with the unions, a big all-out brawl, then Singh would have to take a definitive side. If something really big came out, if Trudeau suddenly, again, hit his head in the shower and thought, you know what, I'm ready to start laying off part of that civil service, I'm going to stand down the unions, which isn't going to happen, but that would be a line that Trudeau couldn't cross with Singh. I mean, just to kind of get ahead, but we're talking, mentioned a rail strike that's coming up, and this could be very economically crippling if it lasts a little while. Yet the federal government has remained hidden and dodging on the possibility of imposing binding arbitration. Why are they so afraid to even imply that they might do it? That goes directly to the government's arrangement with Singh. They do not want to have a fight with the unions, not a big one. And that would perhaps be the final line, because Singh could lose that tiny little bit that's still holding him there.
I don't know, Cory. I'm not sure there's anything that can make him break the link. If he could manage to absorb the blackface, Mr. Singh particularly, a seat.
It's hard to say what possibly could.
If he could sort of get past that, then I think Mr. Trudeau can do whatever he likes.
I'm just so much more cynical about this than you two. You two, I think, are just giving these guys too much credit that it has anything to do with policy. Policy is the cover for these things, but there's actually a simple formula. It's 3 plus minus 1. And what that means is, in a minority government, the only thing that triggers an election is that either the government by itself, the governing party by itself, is high in the polls and can benefit from an election to get a majority, like the last election we held when Trudeau pulled the plug on his own government against Aaron O'Toole. He called his own election, brought his own minority government down. The other way, or you might engineer your own defeat. Harper arguably did that on his second minority government election, some would say. The other way is that all of the other opposition parties, at least comprising a majority of the House, need to all be up in the polls and poised to benefit. This is what happened when Paul Martin's minority government was brought down. The Conservatives were up in the polls, the Bloc was up in the polls, and the NDP with Jack Layton was up in the polls. All three of them stood to benefit, and the government was down. All three of their political interests aligned to an election. If any one of the major opposition parties that would comprise a majority of the House outside the government is not poised to make gains, or at least break even, then there's no election. It's simple math. It's a formula. And ideology has only a marginal amount to do with it, and is generally more of the casus belli for war rather than the underlying cause of it. That's my cynical take.
You are a cynic.
Yep. All right. Well, we're going to move on here. This is, I just love nutty professors. I love nutty professors. They just remind us how disconnected from Earth some people can be without getting on a rocket. So we've got this Professor Lisa. Is it Lisa or Lisa?
Lise.
Lisa?
I'd say Lisa.
I'm going to say Lisa.
Mm-hmm.
Lisa Gotel. She is a professor of gender and women's studies at the University of Alberta. That almost tells you all you need to know right there. Fake departments with fake jobs and fake academia.
Nothing fake about the salaries, though.
No, very real cost to the taxpayer and effects on the minds of people, professional minds of people who are there to learn something ostensibly useful. Danielle Smith put out a tweet here saying, I had a great weekend so far, kicked off
Westlock.
Yeah, kicked off Westlock Parade with MLA Glenn Van Dyke, and then I headed to Drayton Valley. I mean, just like a run-of-the-mill thing, probably put together by a staffer controlling the Premier's Twitter accounts. Got a picture of her just doing the summer barbecue circuit kind of thing. So she mentioned she went to two places, Westlock and Drayton Valley. Professor Lisa Gotel tweeted to that, Premier Smith updates on her tour of White Alberta. And you should just note, White is in lower caps here. I bet you she follows the Canadian Press style guide and puts other races in all caps. The except for W for white. Notably, that is not a part of the Western Standard style guide. We hate everyone here. No one gets capitalized.
We're indiscriminate in our loathing.
We hate everyone. I hate both of you for reasons I don't even know.
That's a separate show.
Yes, yeah.
That's okay. We reciprocate among ourselves.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah. We discriminate against everyone here. So anyway, just quite something for someone on the public teat to say. The kind of thing that, just imagine for a moment, this had been a conservative academic. This was Tom Flanagan, who actually said something controversial once, not nearly, I think, as offensive as that. And it was national news. And he was drummed out of political campaigns. He was, he may have been censured to some kind in academia. Imagine it was Barry Cooper, another conservative academic, both of which write for us. Barry Cooper quite regularly. This would be national news. Racist professor in Alberta says blah, 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 blah. As far as I can tell, the Western Standard is the only publication in Canada or media of any kind that has even mentioned that this has happened. Nigel, I know our own reporter, Alberta legislative reporter, Jonathan Bradley, asked Daniel Smith about this today. I think she was fairly less aggressive than one would expect in her response, but...
Well, that of course is her style. Premier Smith watched her many, many times face hostile questioning, and she always gives a soft answer, turns away wrath.
But this was not hostile questioning. This was a fairly friendly question about someone saying something very nasty about her, implying that she's
she had the
racist.
opportunity to actually give this woman a swat, and she didn't take it. She just said, well, I don't do gender identity politics, and those who do, leave it to them. In fact, just as a matter of fact, let the record show that although Premier Smith was in those two very much cowboy country, oil rig country whistle stops there during the weekend, where you would expect to see people in cowboy hats, and mostly of the white complexion. If you go through her Twitter feed, you will see picture after picture after picture after picture of the Premier interacting with ethnic communities all through Alberta. I mean, if there is not one, there are dozens. So we published some, as a matter of fact, in the article we did on this, but they were just 3 out of a much larger number. So, inasmuch as the attack on her by Professor Gotel was incorrect, clearly she doesn't just do White Alberta. The other question that I keep coming back to is, what possesses a person in a senior, well-paid university position whose works are favorably mentioned even in the Supreme Court of Canada because she happens to fit that particular political philosophy that is invested in the Supreme Court at the moment, somebody of great power and influence starts to call people names like kids in a schoolyard. What exactly are we paying for with people who do that kind of thing? You would expect, frankly, more maturity, even if you didn't expect more kindness and consideration.
Cory, one of the things that, building on what Nigel said here, I think, nowhere more than academia do you see unserious people in serious positions of power and influence. They are shaping the minds of young adult students who are going to university, which gives you a privileged position in society. So these are people who are going to go out and ostensibly, some of them will do something with their degrees. If they're taking gender and women's studies classes, they're probably only going to become gender and women's studies professors. That's generally about as far as that kind of profession goes.
And also be civil servants, unfortunately.
Yes. You could do DEI studies in government, and until recently in most corporations, that seems to be coming to a crashing end, thankfully. But, unserious people in serious positions and who have the ear of very serious positions like Supreme Court justices. It kind of reminds me a bit of let's throw her up on the screen. Reagan, the world famous Italy. You're not.
They don't want to take credit for her.
Italy's not the least serious country anymore. Now it's Australia. Sorry, Australia. Now you get it. The Australian Olympic breakdance professor. She's clearly unserious, but people who never left the academy, who stayed in the academy and never got exposed to the real world, are able to live in this bubble that is just totally disconnected from reality. I don't know. Do you think, is there anything we can do to rid our universities of this without intruding into academic freedom, or as essentially if we're going to have to treat one or the other?
Maybe if we had more private universities out there, they're private in a sense, but they're very government dependent. There might be some that I guess you could say in the alternative school with classical education that Ford is working on, options where they're going to say, we just aren't going to immerse your children.
Ford, not Doug Ford. Doug Ford is not a friend of independent education.
No, we're not going to immerse your kids in that garbage. And it's garbage. But, you pointed out the bigger and frightening issue with these unserious people in these serious positions, because, yes, they're creating more. They're spreading. Gad said, covered it fantastically in his book, The Parasitic Mind, of how our academic institutions have just become infiltrated with this trash, and it spreads. Because you're saying, what do you do with a gender studies degree? Well, it's not just become a prof. It's, as Nigel said, you can end up in the civil service, and we see how good our civil service has become. Or the other one, which is very frightening, if you come out with a liberal arts degree that's typically useless in the workplace, you've eventually gotten tired of making happy faces and lattes, and you want to get a pension but a relatively job with a lot of holidays. What do? You go back to school, get a teaching certificate, and you work in the public education system. And then they spread that garbage to even younger people. The people in the STEM departments of universities go on into the working world, and they're out there. But the ones educating our children, unfortunately, we're not skimming the cream to educate our children. We're actually starting to compile the stuff from the bottom, and it's bad.
Science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. Right.
So it's a big. This professor has exposed herself for the kind of the whack job she is, but she's just one of many others. Just some perhaps are discreet enough to keep their mouths shut.
You did make a statement about 20 seconds ago that it had to do with academic freedom. You say, what do we do? How do we get out of this?
Well, what I mean is
freedom.
No, what I mean is, if we're to clean up our universities from this garbage, how do we clean up this garbage from our universities without having the government itself come in and say, you can have this professor, not that professor?
That's why I'd like to see more alternatives, not government intervention.
Yeah, because I'm. I try to talk about consistency. I don't like it when the left comes in and intrudes into the freedom of different other organizations. And I'm hesitant to see it from a side with a perspective I would be more likely to agree with. So I don't like the idea of, the province saying, well, we fund the university, so we're going to cut your funding unless you get rid of this professor, this professor, this professor. I'm not comfortable with that. But at the same time, I'm not comfortable with my tax dollars going to that professor, and that professor.
And that professor, and that professor get together and exclude other people who have a different point of view. The University of Calgary, for example, their politics department was at one time considered to be the nest of the young Stephen Harper.
The Calgary School with
Daniel Smith went through it.
Daniel Smith.
Pierre Poilievre went through it.
There are a lot of people who went through it. And when there was a number of professors who were very much of the conservative disposition. They were not the only professors that you could take classes from, but that point of view, the conservative point of view, was very well represented. It is not that way today. As the old guys have been retiring and doing less, they've come on with a new generation, which is much more in line with the way that this woman thinks. So, you don't want to interfere with academic freedom, but there is no academic freedom. If you are a conservative professor, they will undermine you, undercut you, do everything they can to get rid of you, and they certainly won't replace you.
And like the concept of tenure is important. You've gotten in, and the the reason for that is so you can be controversial without fear for your job, whether it's left or right. But that protection has gotten weakened. Just ask Francis Widdowson.
Ask Jordan Peterson.
Yeah, found themselves on the outs because they so there's a double standard when it comes to applying that tenure. And I don't believe in two wrongs making a right. So no, I don't want to see this gender studies nut bar thrown out because of her views. I would like to see alternatives so kids don't have to be exposed to it. But they have a double standard, because if she was exposing crazy views that are considered conservative, she'd already be on the carpet, probably out the door within a week.
Yeah. Well, and of course, then there's, I think, Professor Pinder at the University of British Columbia, who cheered for the assassination of Donald Trump. I mean, it doesn't end.
I do think that if there is a solution to it, you have to remove the boards that permit this kind of thing. And the boards control the administration, and the administration answers to the board. So if they get bad appointments and the chancellor gets the boot, the board will get around it. But that is complicated.
And money talks, though. I mean, look at Gay with Harvard. And she crossed the line over the whole Israel-Hamas thing that's been going on and so on. And they say, oh, it's her plagiarism and that, but they always could have dug in and found all of that. That's always been there. But the reality was, money talks, some very, very well-heeled backers of Harvard were suddenly saying, you don't get that nut out of there, we're not giving you money anymore.
Yeah.
And suddenly she found herself out.
Well, let's zoom out a bit more from some of the perspectives that Professor Gotel has here. I think she's the quintessential self-hating white progressive.
Sounds like it.
I mean, so like, obviously we're getting in a racy topic here, but this is the topic she decided. Maybe start with you, Cory. What is it? Like, it seems almost pathological that, the old left, maybe there were people who hated their own class. If you were born into wealth and you hated capitalism, you were a self-hating bourgeois. Okay, sure. But today, as neo-Marxism is more focused around identity politics, race, gender, religion, these kinds of things. Why is it that the left seems to be so motivated by self-hatred of itself, most prominently self-hating white progressives?
Got me on a subject that I'll fully come out and admit I don't understand. I don't know either. I can't wrap my mind around that mindset. They see some sort of virtue in self, abasement, in saying that I'm bad. I mean, it's a form of flagellation, like the Christian lunatics used to do in the past, whipping themselves, walking down the street. I'm a terrible person. I'm an awful person, and it makes me better to tell the world that all the time. I guess it's a little bit of that mindset, and they're drawn to that. But I can't rationalize it. I don't understand it. I know I'm not a perfect person, but I don't feel like going down the street to scream them
today.
I know you're giving me a little too much to put myself into their shoes with. I hit my quota with Jag Meat, and I just can't
get any more mileage out of it. Nigel,
you're not going to ask me to explain it, are you?
I don't know. Like you're pretty good at trying to empathize with lunatics, right?
Where did you get that idea
from? What is driving these people to hate themselves? Like, I just can't imagine anyone from any other group saying anything similar. I can't imagine a person of color seeing a picture of Naheed Nenshi in Southwest Edmonton, Northeast Calgary, saying, "Oh, there's Nenshi touring brown Alberta, black Alberta, yellow Alberta," anything like that. They just wouldn't say that because that's insane. That's stupid. That's a stupid thing to say. But uniquely, white progressives hate themselves. And they seem to they particularly hate anyone who doesn't hate themselves.
I'm not going to try and offer you a fully developed sociological theory on this, but I will relate one observation that I made when I was in high school and in my first years at university, and that is the kind of people who think like us tend to do well on rugby teams. Those who do not do well in sports and therefore do not reap the rewards of respect and adulation that come with doing well in sports become resentful, and their response is to denigrate the whole idea of sports to begin with. In other words, if you can't play the game, well, the game can't be worth doing. So you are a loser, and you are a thoughtful person. Perhaps you have been bullied by the sports team in some corridor encounter, and you start to develop another way of looking at the world, and which undermines the credibility and the right to the rule that you find among people who are good at sports. Those guys who are good at sports can't all go on the NFL, but they do go into money establishments. They become very successful sometimes in making money. They become an upper class. They're the guys who drive the nice cars and live in the big houses and marry the most beautiful women, and then that too is a further cause of resentment. So in the end, what you do is you say, it's all wrong. It all needs to be torn down, and we need to come back. Now, somewhere between my cartoon-like extreme and the other position of extreme intellectualism, which is also faulty, there is a point at which some people, if they can't compete, just damn the game and turn around.
Summarize what you said. It's that they're losers.
Yeah,
they're losers.
I did say that. Yes.
Yeah, they've carved a niche to pay their bills, and now they're spitting out.
They're losers.
Well, they
That's
are. The people who want to tear down society are not going to rebuild anything you're going to want to live in.
No.
We have the people who laid the railway across the country to thank for putting it there. We have the people who developed the oil industry for making it possible for us to actually have a train that goes across the country and a car that will take you to the station, on an aircraft. People who are conservatives tend to be builders and achieve things. They're the heroes in the Ayn Rand novels. The people who can't do those things, because they can't do them, they feel inferior, so they just say, well, those are things that shouldn't be done. But it's wrong, and it's not fair. And the system is stacked against us.
We need an anti-dog eat dog law.
Oh,
Well, what a
it's
great
losers.
Right out of
Losers and looters, the
Atlas
same
Shrugged,
thing.
yeah.
Everybody should read Atlas Shrugged.
Well, coming to you live from
The
John Galt studio.
Yeah.
Not everybody knows that we call the studio the John Galt studio. But
No, I don't think we've ever said it on the air.
no.
Fountainhead's a good second one to follow.
Yes.
Well, they're not particularly excellent reading.
Yeah. They got a good moral.
You got to read them.
Yes.
It's like eating your vegetables.
Yeah.
They're good for you. It's just a little hard to going down. Okay, let's switch it up a little brighter. So the academia, the academy might still be plagued by these lunatics, but the real world, business, where balance sheets, dollars and cents, still count for something is going on. Something's going on. The trend of the last 10, 15 years has had every major corporation in North America and Europe adopt these DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion policies, doing away with merit-based hiring based more on diversity, equity, inclusion-based hiring. And sometimes to great disastrous effect for these companies, some worse than others. But what's happening now is they're not just paying the price by not necessarily having the best people in the jobs, but instead hiring based on quotas and what feels good. Now there's an outright genuine consumer backlash that is taking hold. Most recently, there's an activist in the States who's kind of really pushing this. You recall his name?
Starbuck, isn't it, or Star something?
Are you referring to the guy who blew up his Harley-Davidson?
No. It's Starbuck. I thought
Is it Starbuck? I think you're right.
I will.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, I mean, he's kind of leading the charge across the United States, shining a light and exposing the corrupting influence of DEI in these companies, and consumers, like most people, don't buy into DEI bullcrap. It sits well with in the academy. It sits well with radical activists, but most people at the end of the day, thankfully, still just believe that the best man or woman should get the job. That's it.
Doesn't sit well with the people who can't play rugger.
It's not Starbuck, it's Star something, and I'm blowing it.
Starsky. Okay.
Right.
And anyway, he recently turned his attentions. I don't think Indian ever did do DEI, but Indian came out proactively, and I'm very proud. I'm an Indian rider, so I was very proud when Indian came out and said, "We're not playing the woke game. We're not doing it. That's it." To much applause from motorcycle enthusiasts. But then right around the same time, Harley, which was put under the microscope, doubled down on DEI. Do you know who rides Harley-Davidsons? Does it seem like a DEI crowd to you?
Well, I must confess, when the story broke, I was picturing, and I was trying to get artificial intelligence to generate the picture of these guys in the black leather with the patches and the tattoos and everything, standing there in the lobby of the Harley-Davidson head office, which is now in Germany, by the way, and saying, Herr Schmidt, there's people here to see you. That would have been the kind of situation. I can't imagine why Harley would have ever wanted to go there. But of course,
It gets back to what we talked about before. These are the graduates from these woke schools. They're getting into the boardrooms. They're getting into the comms areas. They're getting into the marketing areas, and they're applying their idiocy to these things. The name was Robbie Starbuck, actually, is the activist. But the interesting thing is the ones that are pushing back are what I would call lifestyle brands. We don't go to the coffee cup thing and wear the coffee cup brand on a ball cap. You don't wrap yourself or socialize with a group of people who own a particular type of, phones even have a little bit of it, but the hardcore ones, we're talking John Deere caps. We're talking Harley-Davidson, Budweiser. These companies have people who actually kind of wrap their identity around the brands. And now these brands have suddenly turned around. By the way, your identity also involves that crazy trans person, Dylan Mulvaney, and you're expected to wear that on your outfit as well. And it's backfiring. They do not understand their client base.
Let's see. We've had, what is the John Deere? Walked
Deere
it back recently. Tractor Supply.
Yeah.
Chick-fil-A never.
They were never woke.
They were never really
were
a candidate
never
for
into
DEI policies.
Bud, of course. I mean, it's just almost humorous to see Bud coming out trying to be super masculine again.
Yeah, like they're overcompensating at this point. Like at Sturgis, there was Bud Light stuff everywhere.
Is anybody drinking it?
I mean,
if they could slide it into their John Deere cozy, or Harley Davidson.
But Harley Davidson, had said, no, we're sticking with DEI stuff, triggering a massive backlash. I mean, it was one thing when no one was really talking about it, but then all of a sudden it caught the attention of Harley-Davidson riders. And Harley-Davidson has now climbed down. They're doing away with their DEI. They're going to fire their DEI bureaucrats. And they're going to focus radically on making good motorcycles.
And they better make them in the USA. The same story that had all this also said that they had been considering moving some of their production lines to Thailand, which is not going to sit well with an American audience.
Well, because that's an American, Harley, Indian. These are American brands. These are American motorcycles, and Canadians and Americans who identify with the American style of motorcycle they want to build here on this side of the Atlantic.
Oh yeah, it's a whole part of the identity thing as well. We're supporting local. We are. It's my neighbors. This is my.
If you're riding a Suzuki or something, well, you don't expect that to be made in America. That's not the brand. But Harley-Davidson, Indian, these are iconic American brands, and the motorcycle. We self-style ourselves. It's the ultimate individualist mode of transportation, even more than the muscle car.
The old easy rider guys on their own on the highway in the desert. I mean, this is not, again, a DEI type of vision.
No, who the hell do they think are riding these things? I don't see Dylan Mulvaney.
That disconnect of these people who are getting to the upper echelons, they really don't even know their own product. They don't even know their own customer base. No. But the accountants are figuring it out, because when the sales in Budweiser dropped $1 billion, they couldn't ignore the reality that, holy cow, we step knee deep in some crap here.
Well, remember, in the marketing plan with the Dylan Mulvaney thing with Bud Light, they said, we want to attract a different kind of drinker, which was a not very subtle code for our beer drinkers aren't cool. They're a bunch of dumb rednecks, and they're not cool enough. we want a hipper, more young urban crowd drinking our beer. Well, they didn't get that young urban hip crowd, but they sure lost a lot of their core loyal customer base. Much of it they haven't gotten back yet.
There was actually the famous scene where the guy picks it up and says, I never even liked this stuff that much, and takes something else.
Yeah.
That's a learning moment.
Yeah, we got to remember your market, and that some strong cat piss IPA from an obscure place. That's the ones they were marketing to, and these guys were never going to come to Bud Light. It was just a foolish.
I wasn't going to say it, Nigel, but you said it. It's not even a good beer to begin with. You were drinking the brand. You liked the brand, and when that brand said you're not cool enough for our brand, well, that doesn't leave you with a lot of goodwill with your customers. Okay, well, I think that's a good place to put a pin in it there, gentlemen. Thank you. And thank all of you for joining us today. Very grateful for sharing your time with me, Nigel, and Cory, the rest of the Western Standard team. If you're not yet a member of the Western Standard, you need to be. The Western Standard is one of a tiny, tiny handful of independent media outlets in Canada not yet being funded by Justin Trudeau's federal media subsidies. If you want to keep the Western Standard strong, free, and independent, we need you to step up and support us. Go to westernstandard.news and click on subscribe or membership. It's only $10 a month or $100 a year, and it'll get you unlimited access to all Western Standard content. And importantly, it'll keep the fantastic team that we've built up here over the last 5 years doing the good work that I know you want us to continue doing. Thank you very much for your support and your time to sharing your time with us today. And God bless.